Hey, it's Monday, September 15, 2025, and I've got 4 immigration stories to share this morning. Grab your coffee. This week's a mix of policy moves, strikes, labor headaches, and big protests, all of which have real effects on travel, jobs, and communities. First up, Finland. So there's talk in Helsinki about borrowing a page from Canada's playbook and trying a points-based immigration system. 2 of the ruling parties, the Finns Party and the Swedish People's Party, are backing the idea. The way it would work is pretty familiar. Score applicants on things like age, education, language skills, and whether a region actually needs them. It's part of a broader tightening that Finland's been doing over the last year or so, with tougher rules on work permits and asylum. Why care? Because a switch like this changes who gets a path in and how newcomers are welcomed into towns and jobs. It could steer more people towards skills Finland wants or push others out. It's one to watch, especially for employers and anyone thinking about moving to Finland. Now to the airport drama at home in the Netherlands. KLM is canceling dozens of flights at Schiphol because ground staff are planning a 4-hour strike on Wednesday, September 17, from 8 in the morning to noon. This isn't just a tiny interruption. There was a 2-hour stoppage on September 10 that ended up canceling 202 flights and affecting about 27,000 travelers. So this new strike is likely to cause even bigger disruption, not just on that day, but in the ripple effects before and after. If you have travel coming up through Amsterdam, seriously check your plans and your airline notes now. There's a through line here about labor, and that takes us to the U.S. and trucking. On August 21, the U.S. paused new work visas for commercial truck drivers. The government says it's a temporary review after a deadly crash involving an undocumented driver, but the timing couldn't be worse for an industry already short on people. Fewer available drivers means slower deliveries, more pressure on freight networks, and likely higher prices on goods we all buy. This is the kind of policy decision that feels distant until your grocery shelf gets sparse or a delivery is delayed. Trucking shortages have been simmering for years. Cutting visas into that mix could make things jumpier for retailers and consumers. Finally, the UK, things there have heated up a lot. Protests against immigration started in July, after an incident in Epping where an Ethiopian asylum seeker was detained and then spread fast. Since then, demonstrations popped up in places like Bristol, Manchester, and Newcastle, usually around hotels housing asylum seekers. The big escalation was a march in London on September 13 that drew as many as 150,000 people, one of the biggest nationalist rallies in decades. It turned violent, at least 40 officers hurt and over 140 arrests. What this shows is a spike in public hostility that feeds into politics and policy decisions. When protests grow this big and turn rough, governments end up facing pressure to act, sometimes with stricter rules, sometimes with more policing, and that affects communities and asylum processes. Putting it together, you can see a pattern. Governments responding to political pressure or safety incidents by tightening rules, workers reacting through strikes, and public anger spilling into the streets. Whether it's Finland considering who should get in, KLM staff walking off the job at Schiphol, the US pausing trucker visas, or the huge protests in the UK, these stories all touch things we care about: jobs, travel, safety, and how communities cope with change. If anything here affects your travel, job, or community plans, start checking details now. For flights, check directly with airlines. For worker immigration questions, watch for official announcements in the coming weeks. I pulled these stories together from reporting at VisaVerge, so if you want more detail or updates, head over to visaverge.com. Alright, that's the roundup for Monday. I'll be watching how these play out, and I'll share what I learned next time. Thanks for listening, and remember to check visaverge.com for more updates.